It has come to my attention that two of crypto's biggest ecosystems have just started the race to win the Bitcoin DeFi adoption. So I thought, let's actually figure out which chain has the best chance of winning here. Is it SUI or is it Cardano? Hi, I'm Linda, and if you'd like to see more content like this, make sure to give me a follow. And remember that this is not financial advice. Always do your own research. Bitcoin is worth well over $1 trillion, so it's really not a surprise that altcoins want to get their hands on that capital to pump their DeFi TVLs. Historically, there's just been one big problem with that, and that's called bridging. If you want to deploy capital from one chain to the other, you have to bridge assets. And while there are people who get wrapped BTC to deploy it for yield on other chains, most people still just don't want to touch traditional bridges. And I mean, for very good reason. Bridges have always been the single most vulnerable piece of crypto because they concentrate huge amounts of money into a single point. They rely on external mechanisms such as validator signatures, oracle messages, or multi-sig approval. And with AI getting insanely good now, those settings are also getting increasingly easier to hack. In the past 6 months alone, we've had over 20 bridge exploits with over $400 million of stolen assets across multiple chains. And if we're being honest, that really doesn't help convince people to deploy their assets into another ecosystem. And I think Bitcoiners specifically are a very hard crowd to convince here. They're just not your typical degens. So to actually convince them, builders had to find a much better and safer solution. And what they came up with was a bridgeless bridge approach. Now, the non-custodial bridging idea isn't exactly a brand new concept. On Cardano, builders have already come up with different solutions where you can use your Bitcoin in Cardano DeFi while your BTC stays secure on the Bitcoin blockchain, and you never have to hand over the custody to a single entity. On Cardano, that started 2 years ago already, and so as I was scrolling X, I saw that SUI is just starting to get in on the Bitcoin DeFi idea as well. And I thought it would be such an interesting video to actually compare the two and see who has the higher chance of actually winning the Bitcoin capital. But before we do that, I want to quickly introduce today's video sponsor, and that's Starch. As you might know, my Cardano stake pool was one of the Starch pools for quite some time. So what actually is Starch? Well, Starch is a really fun, potato-themed, community-driven, fully bootstrapped ecosystem on Cardano that prioritizes fairness and real-world usability. It's been around since early 2022, and it combines accessible mining, sustainable tokenomics, and practical layer 2 tools for the Cardano community. They've got the Starch chain, which is the mining engine and responsible for a fair and sustainable Starch distribution. And there's also an exciting new feature in development called StarchPay. StarchPay aims to be the transaction layer with an account-based model for simple, fast payments and dApps, so it completely bypasses Cardano's UTXO complexity. And now you might be thinking, what? Mining on Cardano? Yes, mining, with real block rewards, but instead of proof of work, Starch uses proof of attendance, where your miner just simply has to prove it's online and actively participating. A verifiable random raffle then selects the block winner, with each active miner holding exactly one equal ticket. This system ensures fairness, prevents hardware whales from dominating, and keeps mining accessible and sustainable. To participate, all you have to do is mint a StarchMiner NFT, run a lightweight open source software, proof attendance, and earn Starch. You can run your miner on virtually anything, on smart devices, cars, gaming consoles, and I've even seen people running them on their fridge. So it's extremely energy efficient. Plus, you get extra rewards if you delegate it to a Starch pool. So them supporting community stake pools is another great thing. And plenty of people are already on board. They've got over 2,300 Starch holders and over 920 active miners. So if you want to be part of an amazing, fun-loving community and start mining Starch on, I don't know, your fridge, then head over to mint yourself some customizable NFTs and make sure to create your own unique potatoes. I mean, just to stand out with a truly collectible NFT. You can get 15% off with my coupon that I have linked below, or simply enter Linda when mining the NFT. And remember, it's always good to be a potato. Alright, so let's get back to the main video. And let's look at SUI first. About a week ago, SUI has officially launched what they call the Hashi testnet for Bitcoin DeFi. Their idea is pretty similar to Cardano's approach. Instead of relying on traditional bridges with Hashi, you can deposit your Bitcoin into the protocol. Your Bitcoin itself stays locked on the Bitcoin testnet, and in exchange, Hashi gives you a token called HBTC on SUI. The HBTC is backed one-to-one by the underlying Bitcoin and basically just acts as its programmable version that you can use across SUI's DeFi ecosystem. So this way, you don't have to move the underlying Bitcoin off the Bitcoin network, and you can easily redeem the HBTC to get your original Bitcoin back. Now, when I first looked into it, I didn't quite understand what's so great about it, because so many people kept saying, oh, it's a bridgeless bridge. But when you look at it, it still just sounds like a traditional bridge, right? You still have Bitcoin locked on one side and a wrap token representing it on the other side. Well, the difference is really more about how that Bitcoin is secured. With traditional bridges, there's usually one central custodian holding your Bitcoin. And the problem here is simply the trust assumption, which is exactly why so many bridges have been attractive targets in the past. Now, with Hashi, there are actually multiple independent layers of verification, which should make it much more secure. There are basically two completely separate security teams that are checking every Bitcoin transaction. The one side is made up of Hashi's validator network, and the other side is an independent group of guardians. Before any Bitcoin can even move, both sides have to approve it. If one side gets compromised, the other one can stop the transaction from going through. That's what SUI calls the guardian layer. And more layers of safety should also make the system much harder to attack. Now, at the end of the day, it's still people and institutions watching over your Bitcoin. So calling it not a bridge is partly just branding. But I think it's still safer than traditional bridges where you're relying on one single entity to secure everything. And so far, SUI's Bitcoin solution seems to be getting a lot of traction. Hashi has already attracted over 25 institutional partners and projects like BitGo, Ledger, Blockdaemon, and Cumberland. Now, to be honest, I'm always a little wary when I see these big partnership announcements because sometimes they just slap their logo on a website without actually really being involved. But in either case, I think this is an amazing start actually. Though they haven't announced a mainnet launch yet, but I think just with those partners, they'll probably get a pretty strong initial liquidity boost. Alright, so that's mainly the overview of what SUI is building, and now let's look at Cardano. They have been working on bringing Bitcoin DeFi into the ecosystem as well, and there are actually a handful of projects building here. One of the biggest and first ones is being built by Fluid Tokens. It's called Bifrost, and it's also a trust-minimizing Bitcoin bridge. They started building this, I believe, 2 years ago already, and they were really one of the first ones to be doing this. They're already live on the testnet as well. And Fluid Tokens is a lending platform, so they already have experience here, and I think they're honestly probably one of the best fitting teams to actually do this. So here's how they do this. Instead of relying on a single entity, they utilize Cardano's stake pool network to create a much more decentralized way of bringing BTC into the ecosystem. Now, we've also seen teams like CSwap who built BTC Karma. Their protocol explores how Bitcoin holders could earn yield and participate in Cardano's DeFi ecosystem. And the great news is they're already live, so feel free to check it out. I've left the link in the description box down below. There's also another team working on building a Bitcoin DeFi bridge, and that's one of Cardano's founding entities, IOG. Their solution is called Pogon, which has a pretty similar end goal to Hashi. They want to build a complete Bitcoin DeFi platform on Cardano. The vision here is to create an ecosystem where Bitcoin can be used as collateral, borrowed against, lent out, and eventually support an entire credit market. So multiple teams are pushing Cardano toward Bitcoin DeFi. Which one will eventually get the liquidity remains to be seen, because Cardano historically has always struggled to attract liquidity. But I guess Bitcoin holders can simply pick and choose here between different approaches and products, which I think isn't necessarily a bad thing. So if we compare SUI and Cardano, SUI's approach is very much centered around Hashi. They're building a complete Bitcoin finance platform with institutions very much in mind. They're backed by multiple layers of security, and they already have a very long list of industry partners before they even launched. Which is why I think it will be so much easier for them to attract more Bitcoin capital initially. More than 25 institutional partners are already testing lending and credit applications on the testnet right now. And when you have an OCC chartered bank and an SEC registered advisor, the institutional legitimacy could easily grow hugely. Which is something Cardano doesn't really have yet, at least not officially. But I do have to give Cardano's community credit for thinking about this years ago and basically pioneering this idea. They came up with it first, and so Cardano's approach feels a lot more diverse. Instead of one project trying to do everything, you've got different teams working on different parts of the stack, different solutions and different applications. Fluid Tokens utilizes Cardano's stake pool network, which I personally like the most, to be honest. Pogon is aimed at institutions as well, and I think Hoskinson mentioned that they already have a lot of interest from the big players as well, but I haven't really seen any official partnership announcements yet. So him saying that might be something, it might be nothing, or it might just be him being a little salty over not getting treasury funding for Pogon. So I don't really know, but I hope they do have it though, because that would level the playing field quite dramatically. And it honestly does make you wonder why it's so much easier for SUI to land partners like that than it is for Cardano, a blockchain that's already running the UTXO model and hasn't had a single day of downtime in almost 10 years. Well, I can't really fully answer that question. I guess it's really more about marketing and metrics. SUI sits at a $3 billion market cap, which is roughly half of Cardano's, but its DeFi TVL is a completely different story. SUI has over $430 million in DeFi TVL, while Cardano sits at just $62 million. So there's much more activity on SUI already, and I guess maybe SUI just has the better connections, while Cardano generally struggles a little with a perception problem. But either way, Bitcoin DeFi is definitely something that's worth pursuing, because after all, it's trying to bring a $1 trillion asset into DeFi. And when we look at the total DeFi TVL, that sits just at around $76 billion at this moment. So even if just a small percentage of Bitcoin's idle capital starts flowing into it, it would be a huge win for any altcoin. So whether SUI, Cardano, or another chain ends up leading this, I think the race has officially begun. And maybe this is going to become one of the bigger narratives in the future, as Bitcoin needs the transaction volume just as any other blockchain out there. Altcoins do need Bitcoin just as much as Bitcoin needs DeFi. So let me know what you think. Don't forget to like this video, and I hope I'll see you in my next one. Bye.